Hi, I'm Jazz Obrecht, and welcome to my Talking Guitar podcast with Keith Richards in 1994. Keith and I came up with the idea of producing a one-shot magazine that the Rolling Stones could sell during their Voodoo Lounge tour. And so, thanks to Keith, I was flown into Toronto, where I was to interview the 6 working members of the band, where my interviews with Charlie Watts and Mick Jagger and Ronnie Wood and the rest took place in the cafeteria of the Crescent School in Toronto, which the Stones had rented for the rehearsals. My interview with Keith took place in room 311, which was a classroom that he'd taken over. In Keith's inimitable style, he redecorated this room in like a harem, with beautiful plush red tapestries on the wall, thick carpeting, couches and chairs, and it was like a lounge. We'd interviewed before, and Keith greeted me warmly and gave me a firm handshake, and we sat down to have a very friendly conversation. Highlights of the interview for me included Keith's insights on why Brian Jones left the band, on why Bill Wyman departed the band, and Mick Taylor as well. I also found it interesting how ultimately he left the decision about who would be Wyman's replacement with Charlie Watts, who chose Darryl Jones because he played with Miles Davis's band. We also moved on to talk about how Keith writes songs with and without Mick, and one of the funnier moments for me occurred when I asked Keith what Mick has taught him about playing guitar. Before we roll the tape, I have to point out that a few days before I left San Francisco to fly to Toronto, there was an article in the San Francisco Chronicle with a few words from Keith, and Keith described himself in the article as the, quote, benevolent tyrant of Voodoo Lounge. And so I began our interview by quoting Keith saying that he was a benevolent tyrant. The tape recorder cut off my question, and so the first sounds you hear will be Keith answering that particular question. Anyways, I hope you enjoy this conversation.
Benevolent tyrant. Yeah.
Benevolent.
Yeah. Somebody's got to do it. Yeah. Crack them all into shape. Yeah.
Where the hell?
Well, there's not a lot to be done in the tyrant business, actually, these days.
Not much future in it.
There's not much need to tyrannize anybody there. Everybody's performing perfectly. So it's, I don't have to crack the whip very much. Yeah.
That's funny. Your new record is right up there with Beggar's Banquet and Exile.
Well, that's nice to hear. That was what I was aiming for, but I was pretty high sights. I didn't know if it would make it. It's nice to start hearing it. I said, I knew it had to be a special one. The whole point of us going through Steel Wheels and getting back together again. I said, well, then we have to build on that. It's like starting again,
Yeah.
And especially with, with Bill leaving as well, which was.
What's the deal there?
He just didn't want to do it. Wow. I don't know. I could never get a straight answer out of him.
You sure?
Just didn't want to do it. I mean, and I tell you this, I was well, that's no kind of answer, Bill. And I would get mad,
Yeah.
And then now I look at it as that, hey, if you don't, to do this gig, you've got to really want to do it 110%, at least, I mean, that's how much it requires to do the gig, to do it right. And if you don't have that, then now I can say, well, and look on the kindest light I can put on it is that Bill bowed out gracefully, because he couldn't guarantee that 100% anymore, maybe. And on top of that, I know that I don't know, to me, idiotically or whatever, developed an incredible fear of flying.
Well, you sure landed on your feet with Darryl Jones.
Shit, straight in. It was, I mean, the only problem, the only cloud on the horizon last year, putting all this together was changing, the bass playing, things, as I said, changing, and 30 years, the same rhythm section, this is a major upheaval, but in actual fact, it went as smooth. We played with a lot of great guys, and eventually I said to Charlie, you decide.
Why'd Darryl get the gig?
Because I left it to Charlie to decide. And he said, you bastard, you put me in the hot seat. And I said, yeah, for once, Charlie, once in 30 years, you're going to be the supreme judge on this. Mick and I say what we think, because they were all such good players.
Yeah.
And hey, you're playing like a couple of hours with a guy and then another, it's so difficult to tell.
Yeah.
And I thought, eventually, well, what really counts is who plays with, what the drummer thinks, who's...
Right.
And so to get to that question, why Darryl, I think that 5 years with Miles Davis didn't hurt as far as Charlie Watts is concerned. because Charlie being a jazz drummer himself, to Charlie, rock and roll is part of jazz, and it's like, and it still has to swing, so I wanted... So, in a way, one of the best decisions I made at last year was to leave the actual choice up to Charlie.
Well, you'll be pleased to hear that Darryl said that that you have a lot of similarities as a band leader and recording director with Miles.
That's funny,
He sees a lot of parallels.
It's because a couple of times he's turned around and said, Miles would have said that.
Well, the big question everyone wants to know is, what has Mick Jagger taught you about playing guitar?
What has he taught me? How not. Not how not to thrash it, but I must say, no, that's not fair, because Mick is actually a damn good rhythm player, man. It's very...
I mean,
nobody, thinks about that, but... He's got a hell of a rhythm chops on him, and with Mick, all I'm trying to do is as far as guitar playing goes, is educate him about making sound, where to put your knob, whether to have it full up, just have it slightly off, and make little tips like that.
Yeah.
Because he tends to sort of get into it a little, and there's a little restraint, and so and also, to me, I think it's really important that the more that you can pull the lead vocalist into the band and feel like part of it, to play with it, which is also why I insisted on bringing the harp back.
Oh, that's a great thing.
I mean, which is another great, probably my other great idea.
He's got the tone, man.
Yeah. And
he
sounds
like Chicago, 57.
The differently he sings, suddenly he starts to sing the way he's playing the harp,
Really?
Phrasing differently. Instead of thinking of two separate entities, singing is this and playing harp is that. And he played all year, he would do 2 hours a day, and before we'd even come in to rehearse or whatever with Charlie, just playing harp, and I can hear it paying off a lot in his singing too. This time around.
Boy, I never would have figured that.
Yeah, I figured like Louis Armstrong, who sang just the way he played cornet, or trumpet, later. But he would sing in the same phrasing, and Mick's phrasing on harp has always been incredibly free and like fluid, and sometimes when he's singing, I felt that he was getting too like click track 1, 2, 3, 4, and thinking of it in a separate compartment. And I think by getting him to play harp, because I love the way he's singing now. But it's like, wow, the man's back. He's got confidence.
There is a remarkable tenderness in the 2 songs that you sing on that record. When you listen to the lyrics.
I guess I write about they're more sort of just a feeling, really, and they're little bits of your life that just come back to you, and suddenly you say, oh, that little situation, now I can like finally finish it off, tail it off, and because now I can write a song about it, but you don't think about it. It's something that happened maybe 20 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever. just a little incident here or there, or that somebody told you something, you know, and it's just in a way trying to transmit a certain feeling. You know.
Do you recall writing the environment in which you wrote through and through?
Yeah, it was pissed out of my brain. This is the weirdest thing. It's like the circumstances. We were in Barbados early last year writing songs, Mick and I, and Charlie was there, and also Pierre, who's my guitar man, and who's also on Through and Through.
Yeah.
He's the guitar at the end. And we'd been out to a club in Bridgetown, you know, tropical night. Yeah, we had a night off, you know. And we get back to Eddie Grant's studio, which is where we're living and working, at 5 in the morning, and get out the car, and I, you know, staggering into there, and suddenly I turned around to Pierre. I said, switch the stuff on, and incoming.
Wow.
And I guess maybe in the car, but I just went into the studio and laid it all down in one take. There it was, and I don't know if it was just in the car, but suddenly they come, you know.
Wow.
And that's really, to me, what songwriting is. I have very little to do with it, you know. As
You're
long
like
as I'm
antenna.
awake, and yeah, it's that one. Really, I much prefer to think of it like that. Songs, I mean, because there's no reason. I mean, I didn't have to work on that at all. You know, only sound-wise, you know, with Charlie, how we were going to do it, you know, with the drums and stuff. But the actual song,
it's a hike.
Incoming, there it was, you know. And I guess really, if anything, that's that one instinct I have, that when there's something around, I recognize it, you know.
And it's the most haiku guitar part, you know.
Strange little riff. And you know, the actual bass comes off of a Jimmy Reed blues. Just a special trick that Jimmy Reed had when he would play the 5 chord. Suddenly it just flooded back to, and of course it's not even a blues, it's not even that, but it was just that one figure on guitar. And so I said, but if I slid it down there, it would still keep going. Like, and suddenly, you know, it's when you're not trying to work and not trying to do things is when the ideas really come, you know, which is why I never ever sit around and say, right, I am now going to sit down and write songs, silence in the house, you know, that I can't do it like that. It's like, and just, I wait for stuff to come. You know, it's like angels tell me. I don't know if they're angels, but
Are there solo compositions on this record, like where you wrote the entire song?
Yes, Through and Through is one. The worst is another. Out of Tears is totally mixed. And
I Go Wild?
I Go Wild is, yeah, pretty much all mixed. I mean, our input there is like musical, you know, on that. Hybrids, ones where we work together, Love Is Strong.
Yeah.
Got Me Rocking, Now Sparks Will Fly. Those are ones that we, you know, like are really 50-50.
Were you working eyeball to eyeball when you did those?
Yeah.
Just
Sparks Will Fly was actually eyeball to eyeball with Charlie Watts more than anybody to start with, because we wouldn't let anybody else play on it until we'd honed down that rhythm track thing dead right, you know, because it was like three's a crowd, you know, for a minute until we'd worked it out, you know, and then let everybody else in. But writing wise, New Faces is I think pretty much all mixed. Maybe a bridge, I'm not quite sure. It gets a little blurred here and there.
So you have an arrangement sort of like Lennon and McCartney, where both violins would go on the songs?
Well, you know, you come with songs of your own and things that you that have arrived in, you know, there's lovely things like Through and Satisfaction when they all arrive in one bag and you go, thank you very much. You know, give thanks and praises. And then there's ones where you have like a great idea but you don't know what to do with it, and that's usually where you start to really, you know, the collaboration will come in, because you say, well, look, I have this other piece that I don't know what to do with. Maybe would that fit with that? And you know, and that's when you get into the craft thing. But the ideas are already there, and you quite often find that actually you've written the same song. You know, he's written one bit and I've written the other, and we both thought we'd written half a song and didn't know what to do with it, but then suddenly it dovetails, you know.
Can you think of an example like that?
I would say Sparks Will Fly. That's all I had. Yeah, exactly. It was, I mean, I had the hook because Sparks Will Fly and the way it was taken off, but it was mixed bits. The other bit where we like hit the verse, boom. It was like, you know, dovetailed straight in. You know, yeah, we had that, and then this album's different in that we spend a lot of time writing the song and playing before we went into the studio, much more than we have probably done for years. You know,
really?
Years. And we started in April in Barbados, and with nothing more than a week off here, and then we went to Ireland and we were at Ronnie's house. We had a little studio, and we were there from June until December. Then we went into the studio in Dublin. So, you know, we did all year, and I think it's paid off that the band is really playing together.
Now, there's parts like where Ronnie would play a pedal steel.
Yeah.
Whose idea would that be then?
I did. I'll claim credit to because I knew he had one around, and I said, "Where's that pedal steel of yours, Ron?" Yeah, it's in the attic. Right. So we sent a couple of guys, sort of roadies up to go up there, to go and look. They come down covered in dust, but they found it, you know.
Wow.
And because Ronnie, I mean, he said he hadn't played it for like years, 4 years, but he was always very good on it. And so I thought, well, that's another sound that you can use. And so I just got him, I encouraged him to get back in. And I think the real reason we brought it down in the first place is because Jerry Lee Lewis came by for a night and we did a session with him just for fun.
Yeah.
Which is like hilarious, great. It's great stuff I have on tape from then.
Oh, that sounds great.
And that's why I pulled out the pedal steel, because I wanted to get Jerry to do some of his country stuff,
Yeah.
So I wanted, and then after we'd done that, then it was lying around, and I got Woody, and we had the worst, and and we started to get into it and say that pedal steel would be nice there, and I got to say, Don was too. Is like an incredible.
What was his contribution?
Being a it was very much to me, very much like working with Jimmy Miller, who was also a producer but also a musician.
Yeah.
There's to the Stones, it's a real extra plus to have a guy that knows like how things are played, what's done, and Don's real contribution is like, you've got 100 songs here. We have to choose. Let's cut this list down by half to start with, and then eliminate. Because there was just songs coming up with even more and more stuff. And we were in danger of just being buried in an avalanche of material.
Yeah.
And it was like to hone down that. Also, I had Don Smith Engineering, who's the guy that did the 2 Winos records as well. So I had a team going there that was, very well used to working with each other. Don was the new boy, but slotted in beautifully, handled the personal stuff really well, just keep your mind on what you're doing, There's atmosphere was very much Exile on Main Street, actually. I can't think of session since where things were quite that loose and free, and ideas were popping, and Charlie Watts moving his drums, which is unheard of.
On those different layers of the stairway?
Yeah, he would work the staircase, and that's something that Charlie hasn't done, I don't think, since Beggar's Banquet, or maybe Exile, since that much input from Charlie. That was amazing.
Interesting.
I think a lot to do with the fact that he's been doing his own thing, you know. I mean, with Bernard Fowler, you know. I mean, he's taken that jazz band around. You know, he's worked Brazil and Tokyo with a big jazz band. I said 5 pieces is enough for me. You'd taken like 30. So he came back with a whole new perspective on what it's like when the buck stops here. You know?
He totally downplayed it in my interview.
I know he always will. Yeah. It's the thing is that Charlie is. I mean, Charlie is modest to a fault.
Yeah.
And I mean, the difference I think that I felt with Charlie is that he's always known he's good. You know, I mean, there's never been any doubt about that. You know, in anybody. But I think he's starting to realise that he might even be a great drummer, which I've known for years.
Yeah.
But you can never, you know, I mean. To tell Charlie that is, you know, you'd embarrass him to death. And
he claims he can't.
About why
he
isn't.
Count.
You know, it's impossible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think somewhere lurking now there is like the germ of you know, he's peaking, man. He's playing just so well. I can't believe it. And hitting with Darryl is interesting to see the band. You know, because obviously with a new bass player, it's going to change something.
Is it a big difference in working with?
Not immediately, because right now, you know, we're either playing the record, you know, working those out, or Darryl's learning a lot of backlog stuff. You know, so he's starting from, you know, where they left off. But over the month of rehearsing, I can already hear the songs are changing, the groove shifts. It's going to be very interesting on stage, I think.
Yeah, it will be.
Yeah, because you're going to watch the band sort of growing, you know, at the same time. It's like a really fresh thing. Yeah.
I hear more of a lead and rhythm guitar separation than there has been in the past 10 years, in a sense.
Mm-hmm. I think just more direction, really, that came from Don Was and Don Smith, and also me working with the Winos, working with Waddy. We've just been getting more into. In actual fact, there's quite a lot of guitars on those tracks, but the separation. I mean, there may be 6 guitars on some of those tracks, but they're not on all the time. You know, we shift, and 2 of them will be almost identical, but one will just do a better, you know, a certain lick in one place, and we just pull it out. So there's a lot of that, but I think it's just a very well disciplined album, sound-wise, you know.
Yeah.
And I think in the 80s too, it's very difficult. A lot of the stuff, the material that we're doing that Mick wanted to do, was not particularly guitar-orientated.
Yeah.
So, you know, it kind of you're trying to wedge guitars into places where not necessary, you know, like the Emotional Rescue, you know, Undercover. Around that time, we were doing a lot of material that is not necessarily made for guitars. You know, Mick wanted to get into that dancing, and you know, and okay, here we go.
Yeah.
I got him back now, though.
What's the story on "Blinded by Rainbows," which to me sounds like right off between the buttons?
It is. I think that is Mick's song totally. I mean,
whose idea for the harpsichord?
Harpsichord was well. I think that was. I think that might have been mine. I think, you know, because at the time I just thought it was. I guess maybe Lady Jane came somewhere around the back and hit me. You know. Something. There was just something about the melody that suggested it. Sometimes you listen to a song and it says trombone, or it says harpsichord. You don't know really why. You just suddenly hear this part tingling away, and you say, "What about trying this?" You know, and it kind of fit, you know.
Yeah. Keith, what's the story on the remixes that Virgin's put out?
Oh, yeah.
They're like the one with the zipper on it.
Yeah.
That sounds like a new record almost.
It's funny. I'm hearing little guitars going on and other instruments that I've totally forgotten were on the tracks. Well, they did a lot of work on them, you know.
Were you involved with that?
Only to the point of they would send us what they were doing, and we'd say, you yay or nay, you know.
Oh, I see.
In that respect, because we were making this one, you know, so
Yeah.
we really didn't have any time to sit and but we gave it to guys and said, look, just do it, see what you think, and we all say yes, or, you know, I know, and they started to come through. A couple we sent back and said, do that again, but they did. I mean, they got the picture and came in exile the first time I said, there's something wrong, and they swore there wasn't, and I said, yeah, it's no good. And then they found that there was something in a machine somewhere screwing, and they said, I don't know how you can hear it. I could fucking hear it, man, you know.
Yeah.
So they redid that one, I think, but most of them, we left them pretty happy with them, you know.
Yeah, yeah. You know, listening back to a bunch of your old records recently, you know, a lot of people talk about the Stones blues influence and rock influence, etc., but sometimes I hear a real Bakersfield influence in Jagger's vocals.
Yeah, it's
Where
funny
does
that
that come
I
from?
don't know why, but he likes Merle Haggard.
He's
There's
almost
maybe
got
one,
he's almost got like that broad Southern American accent.
Yeah, it's not Nashville. You're right. It's Bakersfield. I don't know. It's I know he listens to a lot and used to listen to a lot of Merle Haggard. You know, and
Hearing
we
that
always used to listen
steel guitar on the record kind of put it more in perspective this time around.
Yeah, yeah. It's I mean, when you think about it, you go. He even sang Bakersfield. Right? And is it Indian Girl or no? As I remember rehearsing it, the country singing, I was going through Bakersfield. Yeah. I wonder why Bakersfield. I've got to ask him that. Maybe he don't even know himself.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Because it goes way back, though.
I think you must go back to him listening to a lot of Merle Haggard. Yeah.
Oh, man. Have you made any fortuitous equipment finds or?
Some nice new guitars coming through. I mean, I have to break them in yet, but you know, Pierre has been. Here's another. This is one. They're feeling nice. There's a nice area that's going on with like acoustic electric. A Fender popped us a nice one that has got a pickup in the bridge, you know, and it's hollow, so it picks up. And but also you can mix it in with the other pickup, and which is like proving interesting. The Music Man guitar, those silhouettes are little darlings.
Last time we talked, you were curious to see how the Robert Johnson guitar would age, and if in 3 or 4 years it would sound like the one on the record.
It's sounding great. You know, I've had it. Yeah, it's 3 or 4 years. It's a beauty, man. It's the acoustic on the worst.
That's what I wondered.
Yeah. And yeah, the old one. I actually I left it at my house by accident. But I'll have my hands on it soon. Yeah.
Oh, good.
But I don't want to trust it to the carding. You know, I've got to wait for somebody to come. My dad's coming up. He'll bring it.
Oh, that's great.
That's cool. Yeah. That's the very chap. Dad, and don't forget my guitar.
You can trust him with it, huh? What's it like touring or getting ready to tour now that you're 50 instead of 20?
Yeah, you're probably more ready for it now than we were then. You know, I mean, and after all, in those days, a show lasted 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for a lot of that period, not even that, because usually, you know, it was teenage riots and everything, and it was more. You might play. I remember those sets that went on for like 1.5 songs. You know, before the whole place was pandemonium. The cops were taking you away. You know, and out of there. You know, and people are fainting, and you know, in the teenage days. So it wasn't really so much hard work. You did a lot of hard partying and a lot of hard driving. You know, but now you're up there for like 2 odd hours. You know, it's. Guys are probably in better shape now than they've ever been.
You are? Really?
Really, yeah. I mean, first off, you got to be. So you're going to contemplate doing this, you know. And the rehearsing is like, Actually, probably because when you're rehearsing, you're working maybe 10, 12 hours a day with the guitar around your neck. You know, so by the time you get on stage to do 2 hours, although obviously doing a show in the lights and the adrenaline, you put a lot more in there. It's kind of nothing after 12 hours a day, you know.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, the rehearsing is like the real training ground, you know, because that's where you really do work. You get home 4 or 5 in the morning from these sessions here at school. You know?
Do you ever
night school? You know?
Do you ever find yourself stumbling across things in rehearsal you wish you had stumbled across during the recording?
Oh yeah, and also you find yourself doing that on stage as well. Suddenly finding that extra lick that you knew you were looking for, and it came too late, you know. But that's one of the beauties of recording live sometimes, you know, is that, you know, and I think, you know, you can add certain things that if you can, and I think these days you can start to get really good live recordings. I'd like to take this show like at certain, somewhere near the beginning, somewhere in the middle of the tour, and then again at the end, and see what we get. Yeah.
John Lee Hooker, bless his heart, cannot read or write, but he has a remarkable memory for his songs.
If you can't read or write, your memory is apparently like 1,000 times better.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I've mentioned
because you get used to saying I've got a memo on that, and so you don't work it. That's
I mentioned an obscure song of his from the 50s called Madman Blues. It sounds like the amplifier is ready to explode to him. And he sang the whole thing.
He's so sharp.
And he said, I remember, he won't remember your name after you meet him 30 times, but he knows that stuff. Do you have that kind of memory for your material?
Probably not as sharp as that, because I can read and write. Sometimes I wish I could. But pretty much, at least, I mean, if not for like a song, like, I mean, there are certain, and there's some I prefer to forget, you know, like some real early dubs and stuff. But musically, you know, if you're Charlie, you know, somebody would say a song and suddenly, you know, we say, how does that go, you know, and then suddenly he'll look at me and say, boom, and we can do the whole song. We've not even played it for maybe 15 years or something, and suddenly it's there. So in that way, there's that instinctive memory, that musical memory that you don't really know how it works, and you don't want to.
Do you ever yank out the CDs and put them on as a reference?
Oh yeah, they be doing now that all the time, don't they? They play me, you know, Stray Cat Blues, you know.
Yeah.
What key? How did we do that? You know, but there's and what tempos, and you know, the tempo of the record, is that right for stage? Sometimes, you know, there's a differentiation there sometimes, you know, and oh yeah, we refer. That's why we're listening to all of these reissues ourselves. You know? Probably more than most people.
Yeah. Well, what's the appeal of working with Woody?
Woody's he's just such a sympathetic player. You know, he likes to weave. He don't just want to play and hog, you know, and just do what he's going to do as if a separate thing exists between. See, this lead and rhythm thing is there's no such thing. You play guitar, and a good band, it should swap and shift, you know. The licks will come from there, and that one pick up the rhythm, and then you swirl it around, and you don't have to think about lead and rhythm. You know, what we're looking for is to break the barriers down, you know.
Yeah.
And that's why I love playing with Woody.
Huh.
Yeah.
I hope you don't mind me asking this, but we're doing a whole magazine devoted to the Stones, and we got a fellow writing a piece on Brian Jones for us.
Oh yeah, no, I don't mind.
And I was wondering if you'd mind assessing what you felt he brought.
Brian, at the beginning of this band, he was a little ball of energy, man. When this band started, before, you know, this is like when it really, you know, started from absolute scratch. Brian was dedicated, very inventive musician, and studied. So because we'd all just met up in London, coming from various parts of England. Mick and I are basically London, close enough to London. Brian came from further away, and we would all meet in this blues club, Alexis Corner's place. And Brian is stunned us playing Elmore James shit.
On slide,
really, on stage with Alexis Corner, Cyril Davis, Nicky Hopkins, and I don't know, Jack Bruce on bass. I think it might have been even Ginger on drums as well. I mean, that was all of those guys were gathering together in these few spots in London. And what did Brian? It was fame.
Yeah.
Really, yeah.
Took it
until the minute that he was a pop star, suddenly something just seemed to switch, and it does that to some people, and it's funny to watch, because at the same time you're going through it, and it's not something that I was aware of immediately at the time or anything, but when I think back and I say that was when suddenly assumed this self-importance, and I think also that Brian did, he was like he was the main member of the band. Mick was the singer and I was the other guitar player, but I mean, I think he felt that at the time it was his band. In actual fact, it was Ian Stewart's. That's the other thing I've learned over the years. We're working for Stu, but
bless his heart.
Yeah, and I think that Brian, and you don't have time to think about this when you're going to, but then Mick and I started to write songs together, and then we sort of assumed that Brian felt, there was a certain bitterness. He couldn't, and then he'd start a competition thing, which you really don't want to deal with when you're working 350 days of the year, on the road,
Yeah.
And so slowly, I mean, it assumed larger and larger proportions. And then, of course, when he discovered acid, well, when we all did, but Brian really, I mean, he really went for it in a big way, And there was that side of him that would wallow in self-pity. And I spent, a couple of times I would really try and re-establish relations with Brian,
Yeah.
And then, which for a while I was working around 67, as a, but then of course Anita got it, and then, so then the triangle, love rears its head, and all that, so you got all of that and all.
Fodder for songs.
So yeah, I said from the first I'm the worst.
Maybe you're right. Did his creativity sort of dry up with that?
He was still fantastic to it. I mean, making records, because he was so versatile. I mean, he'd see some marimbas, which is why you have marimbas under my thumb.
Right.
Or dulcimer, sitar. I mean,
yeah.
He kind of lost interest in guitar in a way, but at the same time he added all of that other color. There's other instruments and other ideas. I mean, he's an incredibly inventive musician. It was just he just got more and more. We all were out of it up to a point, but I mean, Brian, it was like you were carrying a passenger towards the end, and it was like, and just as you were getting pretty weak at the knees yourself, and it was like, so eventually, there you go. I mean, I certainly didn't expect him to croak, within a few months of weeks.
Did you sense a similar thing in Taylor? That it was getting to him?
Mick, no, I don't know. He's a very shy boy, Mick. tell you, lovely guitar player. Really, you know. If you talk to Mick Taylor, and I have, I mean, I see him now and again, you know, and I say, well, why did you leave? And he said, don't know. It's the same as asking Bill White. You know, there's a wipeout point on some guys, you know.
Maybe Taylor and Wyman should get together.
You know, I don't think that's necessary. Just joking. But I mean, Mick's still playing and still plays mean guitar, you know. It's just
he does.
He didn't really have a direction, you know. I mean, I know he's always been happy. Just, I don't know. He didn't really like being a star. Yeah, and always felt like he was a second-hand one because he was like in Brian Jones's shoes. Maybe that had more to do with it than you could tell, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know, you know. But I mean, at the time he left, he thought that he could produce and that he could go on, and actually did nothing for 10 years. You know?
Is there a guy working with you now called Tony Russell?
Yeah.
Is it the same guy? Did he write the book Up and Down with the Stones?
Oh no, that's Tony Sanchez, Spanish Tony. No, they are totally different part of the mafia.
Yeah, I was wondering what he was doing back with the band.
No, Spanish. Spanish had to make some money. I mean, that book was basically. I mean, every chapter starts off fairly accurately, but by the end of it, it's taken so many spins, and I know a lot of the reasons why, because people get arrested, including Spanish Tony, if he told the truth, you know. But at the same time, I don't, you know. I mean, he was down. He's like, Tony.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So far, no farther, brother.
Yeah. When you and Mick are writing songs together, is it important that you have a spirit of friendship between you, or is adversity good for the creativity?
No, songs induce friendship, because when you're working on something, you're just into that, and that brings you closer together. Mick and I are still, you know, I mean, we're still getting used to actually enjoying working together again. You know, it's been very fruitful in this last year. You know, and Mick goes through his things and has been through, you know. But to me, Mick seems to me to be 10 times happier than I've seen him, and comfortable within the band and what he's doing, and really into it, and you know, lost some of that Star Trip thing that was pissing me off you know, during the 80s. It seems to, he's starting to appreciate the basic comforts of comradeship again, you know, and that's it's great, you know. I mean, it's a good feeling right now.
Yeah,
you know?
It's interesting that by distancing yourself from it, you actually become it more so, in a strange sort of way.
Yeah, it is, and it's like I suppose, you know, keeping a band together this long. I mean, it's bound, you know, it was bound to hit a rough patch somewhere. Yeah, and when that happens to most bands, that's usually it. I mean, the ship founders on that rock forever.
Yeah.
The strength of the Stones is that they didn't. They went through it all. Mick and I went through whatever we went through and put it back together, and now got it on a very interesting track again. You know.
Yeah.
So it's like, to us, it's like Rolling Stones too. It's like almost like starting again, you know. It's kind of interesting. You know?
Yeah. Well, I know you guys are busy, and this gives me plenty to work with. Oh, I wanted to ask you one other thing. I'm doing a piece on Willie Dixon from Blues Magazine, and I wondered if you could say anything about his songwriting or.
Can't say enough. Willie, I mean, what a songwriter. You know, I mean, to me, that's one of the names, you know, when I was getting into the blues, it's like, who wrote this? And I'm looking at Muddy Waters, you know, who wrote Dixon, the bass players writing these songs. Yeah. And then I'm looking at Howlin' Wolf wrote Dixon. You know?
Yeah.
And this guy is more, you know, than just a great bass player, you know. And let's face it, he was an incredible bass player.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, that would be enough. I mean, the backbone of blues writing, of post-war absolute.
Poet
and
Lord.
to me, personally, you know, I mean, I talk of him and Muddy in the same breath, you know, and John Lee, come to that.
Yeah.
You know, gents, you know, these guys don't have to prove anything. There's, you know, they know who they are. They knew what they could do. You know, they don't give it, you know, and they know they can deliver.
Did you meet him when you were young?
Yeah, I know him real well. And Shirley, his daughter, and his son. I know. Yeah, I knew him real well. Every time I went to Chicago, they stuffed me full of food. I'd come out 5 pounds heavier. I go to Willie. To me, he's a total gent and one of the best songwriters I can think of.
I'd call him the poet laureate of blues.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. I mean, you just got to. I mean, you get a list of what he's written, and you know, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah. That should prove, that's the proof, you know.
And the stuff he did, he was even...
And also
Chuck,
his incredible
right?
support. I mean, you can't go without saying about Willie, you know, as Marty was, instead of like looking at us like white kids coming in, doing their music, and in their eyes making a fortune, instead of feeling resentful, they actually, hey guys, great, sit down there, I'll show you how to do this a little better,
Really?
you know, and like encouragement all the way, you know, from day one, you know, all of those guys. And Willie extended it into, I mean, the Blues Festival, the Chicago blues stuff. I mean, he put his money where his mouth is as well, you see.
Willie told me one time that when he first went over to England, these kids would come up and ask him about his songs, and he'd sometimes make tapes for them and give them to them right there. Were you ever one of those kids?
No. By the time Willie was working over here, I was probably working the States.
Yeah.
Yeah, because those guys started to really hit England just as we were starting to hit
Right.
America. So no, I mean, but I was listening to it.
Do you have a favorite of his songs?
Man, no, that would be impossible for me to say.
It'd be like picking your favorite kid.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you know, the others would feel bad. It's like picking, you know, when somebody puts your favorite song off your album. You know, I can't do that.
Yeah.
The others would be jealous.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like, you just got to listen to the whole body of work. And it's Willie Dixon's superior, you know.
Yeah. Do you find that now that you're preparing to go for the 2.5-hour show that you're focusing more on a certain period of your career rather than another as you go through the catalog?
Not really. You look for... Actually, what you do is you play everything you can.
Uh-huh.
You know, every song you can remember, and see how they float this time.
Yeah.
You know, and kind of let the songs pick themselves, you know.
This concludes my 1994 interview with Keith Richards. I hope you've enjoyed it. I want to invite you to check out my other interviews with members of the Rolling Stones, which are on my Talking Guitar YouTube channel. Before signing off, I'd like to thank Keith, first of all, for arranging for me to do all these interviews, and I'd like to thank my pal Max Crace, who provided the beautiful artwork that was shown during the YouTube video. I also want to thank my friend and producer, Nick Hunt, for sticking by me through all these YouTube videos and putting them together. And finally, I'd like to thank Steve and Shaw and the other fine folks at the Southern Folklife Collection who've always been wonderful to work with. This podcast is copyright 2024 by Giles Obrecht, all rights reserved. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you again soon.